Some big news today. It's the brand new BMW M3 and M4, and they arrive at dealers next March, and I have no doubt that they will sell just as well as the previous generation, or even better. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why. I'm also going to let you know what I think about the design of the new M3 and M4, and why the M3 is such a better design, in my opinion, than the M4. It doesn't really have to do with the vertical, kind of static looking grille in the front, although I'm going to redesign that as well in this video, of course. But really, what it comes down to is simply a wrinkled sheet of paper. There's lots to talk about, so let's dive in. First, let's talk about some of the spec and tech of this new BMW, the M3 and the M4 here. BMW is now the only manufacturer in this segment here that still offers a proper 6-speed manual transmission, but the manual transmission is tied to the 473 horsepower variant of the twin-turbocharged 3-liter inline-six. You have two versions of the M3 and the M4. You have the regular M3 and the regular M4, and then you have the M3 competition and the M4 competition, which bumps the horses up to 503 horses. This choice, though, whether to spend your money on a 6-speed 473 horsepower version or an automatic 503 competition, could be tricky, but the competition only comes with an 8-speed automatic sourced from ZF. Personally, I think I would sacrifice 30 horses for a stick shift, since I would spend more time having fun onto the on-ramp to I-95 than I would kissing the apex at Sebring Raceway. Max torque for the regular M is 406 pound-feet of torque, and for the competition it goes up to 479 pound-feet of torque. The competition models will also have optional 4-wheel drive, but it will be M-tuned, meaning the front axle power only kicks in if it's absolutely necessary, and you even have the choice to switch it off completely if you're feeling some drift action. Top speed is limited as usual to 155 miles per hour, 250 kilometers an hour. Standard stuff, but it can be raised to 180 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 takes 4.1 seconds in the standard M's and drops to 3.8 in the competition models. So what about the price? Well, the M3 will cost you $70,895 and the M4 starts at $72,795. But the interesting thing here is that the competition package is only an extra $2,900. So BMW is really making it hard to choose whether to go with a regular M and a 6-speed manual or an added 30 horsepower for $3,000. Those are the numbers. Who cares? Let's jump into the design and let's jump into Photoshop, and let me show you why the M3 is such a better design than the M4. It's very simple. Alright, so here we are once again in Photoshop, and we're going to start with talking about the design. I want to show you the difference between the M4 and the M3 and why I think the M3 is actually going to sell better than the M4 this time around. It's very simple actually, and once I've done this, once we talked about the front, the side and the rear, I'm going to go ahead and take the M4, redesign it into something that would be more acceptable by the general public. Let's put it that way. But first of all, let me say that I'm not really a, big opponent of these big, huge grills here in the front. They look like teeth or nostrils, or someone commented that it looks like a human face with the nose cut off, so you see the the holes in the face. And that was a pretty accurate description in my opinion. I think it looks something like that. I don't dislike it too much. I think it looks cool, but the thing is that the front does not match up with the rest of the body of the car. It does so better in the M3, and as you can see here, in the M3 and the M4, there is one big difference in the design that kind of, to me at least, it makes a big difference when you look at it like this, specifically in this view and from the 3/4 rear view. And that is the shoulder line. If you look at the shoulder line on the 4 Series here, it has 3 different shoulder lines. You have one right here, and actually it's way better than on the M440i, where you don't even have a sharp crease here, which you have here, thankfully, on the M4. On the M440 M440i is just a slope, it's just a radius like that. There is no definition at all. And then they put this massive front face on the M440i. The rest of the body is just all smooth. It doesn't connect anywhere. So it's a little bit better here on the M4 with the sharp line right here, as you can see. So we have one shoulder line here, then that's broken right here, and then it goes into another one right here. So we have 3 levels of shoulder line, and what that creates is right here in the middle of the car where it's supposed to be strong and confident. That's where it looks like it has a broken collarbone right there, so it doesn't have the structure to hold up the body of the car. It looks like it's so undefined. And then if you move your eyes, if you pan across the car from the rear, where it looks cool, it looks okay, side looks okay, what's going on here? We're kind of starting to wonder where the shoulder line is. And then we come to the front and look at this face where it's super structured. It's like the front is 4K and the rear is 360p, if that makes sense. Another way of putting it is, imagine if I take this paper here. This is what I wanted to show you with a wrinkled paper analogy. So we have a paper of some sketches here. Let's just wrinkle the first side, one side of the paper. We'll wrinkle it like this, take it out, and you can see that the wrinkles, they kind of gradually go from extreme to smooth out in the back here. This is what happens naturally, but the M4 is the equivalent of having wrinkles in the front, and then all of a sudden it becomes the smoothest paper you've ever seen in your life. Right now the M4 is kind of like this. It's wrinkled in both the front and the rear, and in the middle is the smoothest kind of paper right here. It doesn't make sense. You can do this in a very good way. If you want to have wrinkles in the front, you need to have wrinkles all around the car. Lamborghini is probably the brand that comes to mind the first when I think about wrinkled design and almost over styling, but still it works because they all connect to each other, all the lines and the creases in the car, and it creates something really interesting because you can follow almost every single line in a Lamborghini, and you can see that it wraps all around. They go into each other, into the line, into the graphic features. If Lamborghini is a good example of having a wrinkled design all over the car, I think we can say that the Veneers or W Motors is a bad example. Why I think the M3 is the better design here is just look at the shoulder line on the M3 and look at the greenhouse of the M3. If you just look at this space right here of the M3, this can be an E46 even. You really instantly recognize it as a BMW. This up here, if you look at this part, this could be either a Mustang, but more closer to, I would say, if from this angle, it's more like a Mercedes C63 AMG, specifically with this weird un-BMW-ish sloping roofline, which you don't have here. This is more BMW to me, specifically with the window going straight here and then up to this kink right here, and then you have the traditional greenhouse of a BMW 4-seater right there. So it looks better, and on top of that, you have a strong, solid shoulder that goes into the side of the light here and on top of the light in the back, connecting all around the car. Again, that's missing in the M4 up here. So this side here, if we go back to the paper analogy, this 3 Series M3 is more like wrinkled all across like this, instead of having wrinkles here, and then a completely smooth surface in the middle. Papers don't wrinkle like that, and nothing wrinkles like that naturally, so it shouldn't be on cars either. I hope that makes sense and that I got the point across. So that's why the BMW M3 is a better looking car to me. The front here doesn't really bother me on the M3 as it does on the M4. If I were to buy any of these today, I would definitely go for the M3, simply because I don't like this un-BMW-ish style that we have within this area right here. The shoulder line, you have the roof line, which is a Mercedes C-Class coupe, almost copy of it, or maybe a Mustang, not really sure what it is. It's not BMW. Here though, we have a very typical BMW line. So now let's have a look at the side view and see what goes on there. And you can see just how similar these cars are, but there are some small differences that has major impacts on the car. Now it looks like the M4 has a shoulder line that goes right here, but this is just a reflection. In fact, right here in this area, the only shoulder line, sharp line that you have is this line right here, and this transition here is just a sharp reflection because of the lighting in the studio that they were shooting this car. But same thing here, if you look at this part only, it could be a Mustang or it can be a Mercedes, only because it has something that we've never seen in a BMW coupe before. It has this up angle right here of the window, and then it doesn't have the traditional kink that goes like this instead of like like that, like we have here. So they're trying something new, experimenting, and I always appreciate that, but you still need to keep some of the BMW DNA, especially when you throw such a radical and polarizing face onto the car. Then you need to keep more of the BMW DNA in the rest of the body, which I think they did a great job with the M3 down here. As you can see, typical BMW right here. One thing I don't like about any of these cars is that this seems to be a new trend, that we have different wheel sizes in the front and the back, and you might not notice it unless you know about it. But once you know about it, to me, I just want to have the same wheel size in the front and the back. I don't care about having more comfort because we have 19s in the front and 20 in the rear. Just put 20 all around and make it look symmetrical and nice and planted on the ground. You can see that specifically here with the silver wheels, you can see that the rear is definitely larger than the front, and it's just annoying when you know about stuff like that. Last but not least, before we jump into the redesign of the front of the M4, I want to talk to you about the rear, and this is probably the best angles of both these cars. I like the M4 in the rear, but what's annoying, I can only look at this point. As soon as I go to look at anything here, it all becomes a mess. 3 different shoulder lines right here. It's not gonna work for me. But at the M3, I think the M3 is almost a home run here, because we have a very clean looking rear end. It is BMW M stylized. Some might call it a bit over stylized, but I think it's fine for what it is. It's a BMW M3. It should have some aero styling features to it, and it looks cool, and I really like the simplicity of the taillights compared to the M4, where it goes like this. The taillights here, like a hockey stick, a lot cleaner, and also this ducktail right here, and on top of that you have this M carbon fiber little lip on top of that, which we've seen, I think, since E46 M3. And overall, I just think the M3 looks a lot better in pretty much every aspect than the M4. Not sure what you think. Let me know in the comments below. So with that said, let's jump in now and continue here in Photoshop. Let's take the BMW M4 and make it more acceptable to the general public. You know what, one thing is for sure, I definitely can't wait to see both the M4 and the M3 out on the streets, because as you know, seeing something in a video or in photos and digital like this, it's a completely different vibe when you see them in real life. It doesn't matter what kind of car it is. It can be the most basic car, can look super boring, and then you see it in real life and the proportions just all make sense. And I think this is what's going to happen when I see both of these actually, and the M4 as well, in real life. If it was up to me, I would not do the redesign that I do here. I've made a redesign on the M4 40i before, which was just to tweak the design of the kidneys in the front to have them more match the rest of the body. Whenever a company releases a new drastic change like this, the majority of comments are definitely going to be negative at first, but I think that these designs are going to grow on people, and that's why I think they're going to sell more than the previous designs. If you think about it, when Bangle came out with his Bangle butt on the 7 Series, I think 2001, it got slaughtered in the media, and everybody said, like, what the heck is going on with BMW here? What are they doing? But then look at history, and you can tell that BMW 7 Series, that sold more than any 7 Series prior to that. So that was the best selling 7 Series ever, and I think something similar might happen here. I don't even think this is as extreme as the Bangle butt, because this still works, especially in the M3. But what I would do if I was to redesign this, I would actually keep the kidneys as they are, like I did in the M440i video that I made a while back, that not a lot of people agree with, but I would stick with that concept. Keep the new grills as they are and work on the rest of the body to suit that new graphic feature in the front. That might be you know, removing lines around the grills or in the front to not have it be so messy or so busy in the front. Or in this case, it could be adding lines, which I'm doing here as well. I'm gonna add the shoulder line and add a couple of tweaks to the headlights, and also of course change the way the front kidneys look. But overall, I kind of like this concept and the approach that BMW is taking here, that they just went for it and released this drastic change onto two of their most popular models. And I think we're gonna see this change across the model range in the future as well. But there are a few changes here that just needs to be addressed, that are critical, at least in my opinion, and that has to do with the greenhouse and I decided to keep the curvature on the rear, on the light, the rear line on the bottom of the window, to have it go up a little bit in the end. That's fine, we can play around with that. Usually I would want to have it straight and have the kink as we're used to seeing from the BMW, but I'm gonna keep that, and instead of to remove it from this C63 vibe that you get when you look at that little area there from this perspective, you get a lot of C63 vibes, and that has to do with the flatness and the softness of the rear. It needs to be stronger, and the shoulder and the beefiness of the rear fender needs to be enhanced and enlarged. So that's what I want to do, on top of adding a solid, almost too solid here, just to make the point shoulder line that is consistent from the front light all the way to the rear tail lights. So that's kind of the redesign I wanted to do here today. Make a little bit more transformation of the front kidneys than I did with the M440i. If you're interested in seeing what my original thoughts was, you can go back and check this video. I'm gonna link that down in the description if you're interested in that. As always, thank you for watching. I'm the TheSketchMonkey. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.